Welcome to Wellsprings of Faith. My name is Father Liias. I am a Roman Catholic priest, a senior priest on the staff of St. Patrick's Church in Stoneham, our neighboring community. But I live here in Melrose. Actually, I've lived here now 34 years. So this has been my home longer than any place else in my life. And our program almost goes as long as I've been living here. We started Wellsprings of Faith in the mid-90s. So we've been doing this now for 30 years. And the show is about people's faith, their journey of faith, the fruit of that faith in their own lives and in the life of our community and our world. Today we welcome actually a local boy, so to speak, Paul Bourne, Father Paul Bourne. He's presently the parochial vicar at a parish in Plymouth, Our Lady of...
Mary, Queen of Martyrs.
Mary, Queen of Martyrs. I know Our Lady's name. Queen of Martyrs in Plymouth. But he grew up in St. Patrick's in Stoneham, the church I'm serving at. So we're going to hear a little about his life and childhood there and his call to the priesthood. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Father
Thank you. And you're only ordained now a little over a year, right?
Just a year and a half.
A year and a half. They call them baby priests.
Exactly.
Well, I'm a relatively baby priest, although I was an Episcopal priest, for 40 years, and then now I've been a Catholic priest for 12. So tell us about your life journey growing up. Did you grow up in Stoneham?
I did. I was born in Newton, Massachusetts. My mother's family is part of the Italian kind of historical community there.
Yeah, your last name's not Italian.
No. My father's from Chicago by way of Texas to Boston. He's an architect and came here for work in the 80s.
And what was his name background?
German,
yeah,
Irish,
yeah.
and
Father. Sounds like
both
that,
my grandmothers are Irish, so
so you're mostly Irish.
Half Irish, but ironically grew up around mostly the grandfather's families.
Oh, really?
On both sides, so for various reasons.
And they were Catholics going back a few generations.
They were actually. I have, my father's cousin has been doing a genealogy for the last 10 years or so, and I've been finding out a lot of interesting history. In fact, my paternal grandmother grew up across from St. Agnes Church in New York City, where Archbishop Fulton Sheen preached often his famous 7 last words.
Oh, really?
And she converted from Judaism there
to
Catholicism.
How interesting. You have Jewish blood in you, too. How interesting.
Interestingly enough, I worked in an office building next to that church for 2 years, and I would often attend Mass, daily Mass at that church, so we could get into that at some point.
Oh, yeah, that's a wonderful.
It's a long way from Stoneham, though.
Yeah, it's fun to see. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you.
Yes.
And part of that knowing is our genealogy, isn't it?
It is.
Because all of that comes to make us, and God uses all that history to shape us as well. So back to your childhood.
Yeah, 1 year into my life, we moved to Stoneham. My sister was born a year later. We grew up as the 4 of us on the, I'd say, the Wakefield side of Stoneham, and I went to Stoneham public schools throughout, although I attended St. Patrick's Parish every Sunday with my mother and my sister. My father would join us generally on, Christmas and Easter. What's your acronym for them?
Typical C&E.
C&E, yeah, people have different ways of saying Easter, Christmas only, Catholics.
Right.
But I did not attend the parish school, actually. Went to Central School, the old and then the new.
Was there much piety at home besides taking your Mass at Sunday?
We didn't pray grace. We didn't say the rosary or anything like that together.
Rosaries.
None of that. No reading Bible stories.
Yeah.
I'd say we did not eat meat on Fridays during Lent, and we put the family creche up and, of course, a Christmas tree. But that was the extent, yeah.
Did you have grandparents who were more devout or pious?
I did, and I should say I'll give my mother credit because one thing is when we traveled, we always went to Sunday Mass. Something that's lost upon many Catholics today. It's not to make plans when they travel, and this was pre-internet, of course. I mean, I'm not quite that young. But, but my grandparents, I'd say later in life, when my grandfather died on my mother's side, my grandmother, her personal belongings were given to me. She had been deceased for 10 more years before that, or even longer.
You didn't really know her.
I did not really know her, and she had an aggressive dementia. So when I was growing up, she was walking around like she didn't know who she was. But by that time, I was a practicing Catholic as a teenager, young adult in college, actually. And they gave me her missal, and I opened it up, and the pages would creak and crinkle, but I had in it her prayer cards and notes and things like that.
So she was a devout...
She was, but she did begin to lose her brain activity fairly early, I believe in her 30s or 40s.
Oh, that? Yeah.
Yes, she had something that's sort of the opposite of Alzheimer's, where it takes you early, and then they're still researching it. In fact, my
Yeah.
mother's been
And then
participating
you
in a
kind of
study
come to a
about
static
it.
place, and then
Yeah, you
it
do.
doesn't kill you. Yeah, but
Right, yeah. She
yeah.
lived to an old age,
Yeah,
but she died in
yeah,
96.
but
Yeah,
without it, not.
1996.
So what happened to you in childhood that made you a practicing Catholic?
Yeah, well, later in seminary, I would really learn this theology of that everything goes out from God, and as
Yeah.
a return in love for the love He gave us, we make a return to Him. And He
Yeah.
aids us. We don't do that by our own power, we do it by grace. And
Yeah.
I recognize that grace was working
The
powerfully.
prevenient grace.
Yeah,
Right? Grace that's there before we see it.
And
or
yeah,
recognize
the
it.
exitus and the reditus, that
Right.
going out and the coming back. And God was drawing me back very clearly. What I remember is being interested in church growing up and the prayers that were being said. I was a good little boy. I wanted to do well in the things that were given to me. So when my
So
mother,
unlike a lot of kids, you didn't mind going to church, and you found it
No.
actually intriguing or engaging. It wasn't
yes,
just,
the words of the Mass, even though those are, because of the change of translation, I do appreciate much more the current translation, but I give credit that even back then,
Yeah.
the words of the Mass that expressed that God had a plan for my life, that God cared for the downtrodden, and that there was something in the future for me, those were really attractive ideas to me.
Oh, wow.
And I really knew that only God could provide that.
It is true, that the Gospel's in the liturgy there. I mean, so many Catholics leave the church, and in my experience, because having been a Protestant, find Christ in some evangelical church, and they say, how come they never told me this at the Catholic church?
Yeah. Well,
And
they
in
told
fact-
me. I don't know.
Well, they were being told it every Sunday in the but they weren't paying attention.
Right.
But a little bit it has to do with, like you said, grace and the work of the Holy Spirit. You
Absolutely.
can't understand spiritual things apart from the Holy
Absolutely.
Spirit.
And I did learn a lot from being an altar server. So
Yeah,
my mother
yeah.
signed me up, and I kicked and screamed until I got trained up, and then I learned the terminology, and I wanted to do well,
Yeah.
and I would try to follow the
Now,
rules.
who was the priest who was there?
Father Bill Schmidt was my pastor.
I have met him.
Yeah, through and
I
through.
used to wear his alb a lot. He left that
He
behind.
left it behind.
But now I can't find it anymore. I don't know if he came back and took it or what.
Yeah, he was there right up until around the time I graduated, and I think you started coming around St. Patrick's right as I left high school.
It was after he had left. He left, I think, in 2010.
Around 10 or 11, maybe.
And
yeah.
Mario was,
Right.
I started going to St. Pat's myself when the year after I gave up my Anglican orders. I was now a layperson for a year, waiting to see if I would be ordained. It wasn't guaranteed. But during that year, I used to go to the noon daily Mass at
Mass, yeah.
St. Pat's.
So I was in college during those years.
And you went to Boston College?
I
you
went to
said.
BC from this fall of
Now,
09.
did that
to
wreck
spring
your
of-
faith, or did it help?
I was warned, yeah, by
Someone
people.
said BC stands for barely Catholic.
Yes, I mean, if anybody's watching from the school, it's my experience. This is my experience, and I'd say that what people are referring to and the danger there to your faith is just the general college culture that is not combated by the school
faith,
for the undergraduates, but the graduate school is very much trying to explore different ways of being Catholic, we'll
Catholic, yeah,
say.
more serious.
And I'd say those are the people who really go and come back a little bit radicalized in their ideas. So, But for the undergraduate life, I was part of actually an excellent student group called the Sons of St. Patrick.
Oh.
That was a student-founded group with the aid of a Jesuit who's still their leader there, Father Paul McNellis, who was swearing that it was his last year when I started in 09, and he's still there doing it.
still
His
there.
health hasn't been great, but he's a tough guy.
And what was sort of his focus in this ministry?
Just being Catholic. We
Like
learned
really
to,
being
our
serious
pillars of the Sons of St. Patrick were faith, fraternity, fortitude, and chastity.
Wow.
And we focused on all. We focused about learning about the content of our faith, being strong in the face of the temptations of college life and the culture, prayer, brotherhood, and specifically because of the temptation to unchastity.
Yeah.
Always focusing on the dignity of men and women.
When did he start that?
I believe it was around 2005.
Okay, so it's a relatively recent.
I was part of really the second
Yeah,
cohort.
yeah,
The founders had just graduated, and actually there have probably been 9 Catholic priests ordained out of that group in different parts of the country.
Years.
Not so much for our diocese. We have a couple for our diocese that were really involved,
Right.
me being
Yeah,
one
of
of them.
course, BC. Yes.
But the BU Catholic Center with Father David Barnes,
Right.
especially from his era, who's now your pastor there at St. Patrick's,
Right.
has produced a lot of priestly vocations for our diocese.
Yeah, he has a real chasm. Now I don't know if you know that he was my mentor and pastor in Beverly.
When you first were
And he, in fact, we were
Catholic
told
priest.
coming into the church, make sure you find a Catholic priest to be your mentor and your sponsor. And that's
So you had been with him maybe 10 years ago, and now you're back.
Yeah, and I
back.
work in our parish. My ordinariate parish started at St. Mary's in Beverly.
What is the name of that community?
St. Gregory.
St. Gregory.
Although it's a long story, it's now it's called St. Athanasius, but it's not long story, not worth getting into.
Okay.
But it still exists.
Both very
they actually have a
admirable saints.
weekly ordinariate mass, which is a more Anglican style mass, at Austin Prep every Sunday.
Oh, really?
In fact, occasionally I go and fill in. I'm not the pastor of the community anymore, but I started that community.
Right.
So, BC, you found God at BC. So this is you could.
I was practicing my faith going into it. I'd say that there was a youth group that Father Bill Schmidt had really put a lot of support behind, hiring the youth minister of mine, Marco Desiderio, who lives somewhere around here. His family's from Linfield. I'm not exactly sure where he lives right now, but yeah, when the recession came, it really, I think, really hurt the youth group and funding for it. And it's hard to move from one generation. You have my classmates were really part of the big youth group movement at the time. And then when we graduated, there's that, you got to focus on the transition, and we weren't doing that.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's virtually no youth ministry. Obviously, I hope that gets resurrected
Absolutely.
under Father Bonds, because that's such an important thing.
It is. And I'm working on the same thing in my parish.
But
I was practicing when I went to
it was,
BC.
In my case, the youth ministry was, we called the YPF, Young People's Fellowship.
Yeah.
Sort of like we used to be, what's Catholic?
CYO.
CYO, right, I remember that. I grew up in Charlestown, which was all Irish Catholic kids.
Protestant in Charlestown.
Who beat me up. I got beat up all the time for being a Protestant and a Nazi, because I was a German immigrant. But that youth ministry was really very important in my adolescent years, really. I kind of wanted to be a priest, but that solidified it when I was in high school.
Same for me.
So off to Boston College and this St. Patrick's. And where in that process did you start getting tickled by the Holy Spirit?
Right.
The feathers of the Holy Spirit talking about priesthood.
I'll get back to BC real quick, but it did begin in high school. So the youth group went to Peru on a mission. They went 3 or 4 times. I went on the second one.
Oh, wow.
And it was there at the mission that the parish supported. They sponsored children to go to the parochial center there to learn life skills and perhaps have a chance to go to college one day, learn to read and learn musical skills and things like that. So we went there just to...
Which part of Peru?
It was in San Bartolo, about an hour north of Lima.
Okay.
Surfing village in the summer, but being the southern hemisphere, we were there in July, there winter, and the village is really empty. So we stayed in one of those surfer motels that had all the rooms in it.
Wow,
and then we would open the center up to all the kids that didn't have sponsorships during the week. But we were really there to learn about our faith. It was really more of a mission trip for ourselves. A pilgrimage to faith and poverty, and that's really how it affected me. We didn't make a long-term impact on the physical, temporal lives of these kids, but we really made a difference in our own lives. God did that. The children did that.
Yeah, mission trips are can be profoundly transformative for people who get involved in it. It's not so much for the people you're going to, the poor people you're going to help.
Later, as an adult, I've done them and built a couple houses. We were teenagers and barely knew, what was going on. There was a lot of teen drama. And
my son had a similar experience. He went to Bolivia and did some work in an Anglican church as an Anglican missionary, and that's where he really, growing up a priest kid is a bit of a challenge if you're going to have faith or not.
Right. The spotlight's on you.
Yeah, and also you're kind of close to the humanity of your father, and everything like that. You can be an impediment to other people's faith if you get too close to a priest. But he had a profound, kind of conversion to Christ, and really that was where he really became. He used to say, "Dad, you always told me God has no grandchildren. I had to find my own faith," and it was there in Bolivia that he really he worked. He founded an orphanage for street girls and stuff like that. He did a wonderful ministry. So U.S. was Peru, kind of transformed.
Yeah, Peru. It was a 2.5-week trip, which is actually fairly long as far as trips like that go. But Marco, our youth minister, was really big into mission. He had gone to a mission school, done a year learning to be a missionary in the world as part of his conversion when he became God's child, not grandchild. And that was very formative for myself. So I spent my senior year of high school really thinking about the priesthood, because when I had been in Peru, the priest there, who's actually now serving with that religious community but in Philadelphia, if he's still there, he might be Father Carlos Keene, if anybody has children that went to Drexel or UPenn. He was the chaplain there.
School,
Then he really challenged 4 of the young men who were there, seeing our faith, seeing that you know, God's clearly calling you to discern something in your life. You can't just fall into your life. That you will naturally desire marriage, but marriage is a vocation. You must discern marriage as you must discern the priesthood. And I took that seriously.
Yeah,
I'd
very
say
wise counsel.
3 of the 4 of us really went on a big journey with that. One of them, I'm the godfather of the only child from his marriage so far, so I keep in touch with them. And then the other one went to BC with me.
Oh.
So we went, the 2 of us that went to BC were really on this journey together, would often talk about it. So he never really seriously thought he had the vocation, but it never left me. So I remember telling him in my sophomore year when he just asked, so what are you going to do about this? We've been talking about it for 2 years. And I said, you know, I will have to go. I know I'll have to go to the seminary. I'll have to ask to be admitted at some point.
Yeah.
I knew that there was nothing more I could do just thinking about it, but I also had decided I would finish college. So I wouldn't leave BC and go to, say, a college seminary. I knew that because I didn't have a really strong upbringing in Catholic living and life, you know, so I've said what we did do, but there's really so much more to giving your life over, and I don't think I would have made it, and I sensed that I wouldn't have made it through seminary if I had just gone down and been in that whole world. I wouldn't have had a lot of, I would have the moral support of my family, but they wouldn't really have understood, I don't know if God led me.
How many children in your family?
Just the two children, and I'm the oldest cousin, so a lot of my cousins were, until I left college, I mean, that's when they were going through high school, so they were really just children at that time. Now they're doing all kinds of things, Army helicopter pilots, you know, graduate schools, and you know, different things. So, but I'm going through all this, and I'm the first in our family, and I'd say the family was sort of falling away from faith slowly during that period where we saw a lot of things going on in the church and in families where slowly marriages stopped. Just in a way everything starts slipping. I'd say, especially once the modern cell phone world comes about, and sort of everything sorts of.
Now I'd heard through the in sort of the parish lore that a couple of the worst misconducts priests were actually were at St. Patrick's sometime during. It might have been before you, but...
It was certainly before me, but I would later learn that one of the priests who was very helpful to me at the time, and he really was dealing with a lot of the victims there who wanted to still speak to a priest and deal with it in faith, and it took a toll on him.
Oh, I bet. Uncovering the misconduct.
A young
grievous sin.
A young priest, but never affected me. I was in sacristies. I was around the church a lot as a young boy. Even, you know, you might have identified me as a potential victim. My parents would later divorce, and you know that's often where predators seek families that are vulnerable. I never had any experience as a child where I really thought that
anyone was trying.
And I really would have been fairly naive at the time about it. But maybe God.
The whole church was naive. I mean, unfortunately, the consecracy thing was not so much overt malpractice and with her cover. It was a naivete about how profoundly destructive this, this, well, what do you want to call it, this obsession is, and sin, and how difficult it is. Because they would ship them off to psychiatrists and get a letter back saying they're all cured, put them back in ministry. And that's the naivete that made it look like the church didn't care, which wasn't really true.
But
so anyway, you
proud
survived.
of where we've come. On that front.
And so in college, then, when did it kind of really clarify?
I'd say I had to put it on a bit of a back burner because I was learning so much about my faith. I was growing, and while I was practicing when I entered, I really also learned the challenges that I wasn't ready for with college life. I had, in high school, I think, grown very prideful about being a sheep among wolves, and then I became a much smaller sheep amongst many more wolves. And I'd say I failed and had to come to grips with my humanity and learn that I needed this community of the Sons of St. Patrick to lead me and help me. And I'd say by the time I graduated, I really got my ducks in a row a little bit more and learned what I needed to do to be a practicing Catholic, and then got a job. I had studied business in school with a minor in philosophy and spent a lot of my time thinking about my faith. But the degree I got was in finance, and I got a job at a bank in New York, and I went to do that. I didn't have a kind of flashy job, but I worked in kind of the back office that does a lot of reporting and never sees a client. But I worked in those big buildings, one of them being across the street from St. Agnes Church on
Church,
42nd
yeah.
Street, named Fulton Sheen Place on the below this.
On the loader, that's
yeah, below the
claim to
42nd Street sign. And really spent a lot of my time in New York City, really taking the lessons I learned at BC to stay close to the community and put that into practice. So I stayed very close to the different young adult communities in New York, including with the religious communities that they associated with. So this would be the Dominicans.
Oh, yes.
The East Coast Dominicans who had St. Vincent Ferrer, they still do, on the Upper East Side, and St. Catherine of Siena, as well as the NYU kind of apostolate and parish down there. But I would mostly be
What years would this have been?
This is 13 to 17.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
I'm trying to think, because it's interesting that one of my first confessor, in the Anglican Church we have monks, and there's a community in Cambridge, and one of the monks there was my confessor for many, many years, and then he up and bolted and left the Episcopal Church and became a Dominican.
Yeah,
but he served at St. Vincent Ferrer.
Yeah, is that Father at the...
Carlton Jones was
okay, I'm thinking of a different one. He went to Gordon Cromwell as an
Gordon
Anglican and came into
Cromwell.
the church through Tom Howard there.
Yeah. That's
Sebastian White.
Sebastian.
Father Sebastian White,
Yeah, he runs a Magnificat.
Right,
yeah, I
right.
know Sebastian. He used to hang around my parish at times in Hamilton when he was at Gordon College.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I knew him, and the Sisters of Life
Yeah.
are largely based out of New
large
York City.
community there,
So I knew them, and the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal and the
Right.
Sisters of the
I
Renewal.
know them there.
So if you think about what's going well in American Catholic religious life, a lot of it was right there, and I
Right
got to be
there.
very close to it through
for
the
you.
Frassati community of New York City, the General Young Adult Apostolate of the Archdiocese of New York, and I actually did get to know an Opus Dei center there, Murray Hill Place. So I was just involved with all these groups in a very balanced way, met a lot of great friends. I get to see some of them not so much and others more often, but actually I was on a trip last week, it's a little time off, and I saw somebody from those New York City days.
Oh,
and,
great.
And that was great, and reminiscing upon how much that time affected both of our faiths. And
Yeah,
that's when I really
and
grew.
the riches of that those communities, like you said back in BC, it's funny, there's a paradoxical tension in the spiritual life, trying to follow Christ. One, of course, is the being drawn towards the world and basically not letting the world's ways kind of overpower Christ's ways. On the other hand, you can be very good about doing Christ's ways, but it can lead to Pharisaism, which actually is worse. It's better that you become dissolute than to become a Pharisee.
Christ spends a lot more time yelling at the Pharisees.
The self-righteousness and and so it's to stay faithful and humble and a sense of, like you said, discovering the need for the grace of God.
There's no solution to saying, well, then I'll just drop my faithfulness so I can not be a Pharisee.
No, that's not the solution. Yeah.
So it was really in my third year in New York, the light bulb went off. This whole story came together for me of what God was doing in my life, and I really learned that what God was giving me in terms of my deepest desires and the experiences He put me through, the lessons I'd learned, was that I could live the life of a Catholic priest, and that really on a deep level I really wanted to, in that I wanted to be a spiritual father for the world and for the church, and I really couldn't. I was hearing this priest preach a retreat I was on, and I was just thinking, why is my heart burning? It felt like Emmaus, the road to Emmaus, where the two disciples are hearing Christ preach and then saying, why is our heart burning with this love? And I realized I want to do what He's doing.
Yeah.
But I wasn't going to be any big evangelizer as a layperson. I realized God must equip those who He calls, and He wanted to equip me with that fatherhood and to make me His priest. And really I have the date somewhere, it was sometime in April, I said, I'll begin discerning the priesthood again. And I remember after work on a Friday afternoon in August, my office had moved to Times Square, and I was going to a new church at that time, St. Malachi's on 49th Street. Many people go there because it's right next to a lot of the theaters, and it's called the Theater Chapel. And they have a very late, I think at 11 p.m. Saturday night Mass for after the shows get out, for the people that drive home so they can sleep in the morning.
Right.
And it was in that church, it was empty on I think it was August 9th, I have it in my phone. And I actually said the prayer to the Lord that, this is it. If you want me to be your priest, I'll be your priest. And it was a very simple prayer.
Wow.
And I had maybe never put it that simply, but I probably had said things like that to God in the past. And this time the answer was just clear in the way for the prior 8 years before that, since Peru, it had not been clear. And I had wrestled a lot with it. That's why I had to kind of put it on the back burner. I knew that one day I will probably have to go, but God will have to show me the timing, because while you cannot decide when you will follow God, you must follow now. I knew that if God really wanted me to go to BC, I had some bills to pay before, and then He put this job in my lap, and I said, okay, I'll take this from God as permission to say, now is not the time, I'll go do this, maybe He'll lead me away from it, and one of the blessings of New York was for the first time I really met a large community of also women who were practicing the faith, who I really thought wanted to be good wives and mothers and would make good wives and mothers. And I really hadn't had that before. That was a hang-up I'd had, is am I running from marriage? And I learned once I met these ladies that, no, I'm running to the fatherhood of the priesthood.
Wonderful.
And finally, after the 3 years we've been trying to schedule this, here I am talking to you, who I'd only see in passing at St. Patrick's when I'd go home during college, saying, what's this whole Anglican thing, you know? And here we are, both Catholic priests together.
I know, here we are. And there is that mystery of, I've been doing a 3-day preaching mission in Lynn this week, and Advent is so much about the sacramentally of time. It's, you know, the mixture of Christ past, present, and future, and it's kind of all the themes of Advent. But the sacramental nature of time, it's, you know, that, I mean, for me, for example, I remember having a clear sense of God wanting to be a Catholic priest in the, I think it was around 1990. But I didn't become a Catholic. I wasn't ordained a Catholic priest till 22 years later. And there's a long story in between, but it's right, God's timing and just following that faithfully. Anyway, speaking of time, we got 3 minutes left, and we haven't got you ordained yet. But I assume you went off to St. John's.
I did.
Right?
I decided to come back to Boston, to the Archdiocese of Boston, to enter seminary. I entered St. John's in 2017. Spent 6 years there, as well as my parish assignments that they gave me during the time. I had a wonderful time during seminary, and I was ordained May 20th, 2023.
Yes.
Started on June 1st, 10 days later, at Mary Queen of Martyrs in Plymouth and Carver, Massachusetts. We have St. Peter's Church down by the waterfront in Plymouth, St. Catery's in West Plymouth, and Our Lady of Lourdes in Carver. I'm with Father Joseph Rake, who many people know, but he's mostly been on the South Shore during his about 44 years as a priest. And so the viewers from Melrose might not have heard of him. But
so what's been the best part of being a priest so far, would you say?
The best part of being a priest is seeing just God work in His grace through the sacraments, through confession, through anointing. We have 7 nursing homes in our parish and a hospital. And so we spend a lot of time with the sick and the dying, but we also have a lot of weddings because of the seaside venues that we have nearby, and a lot of very faithful people. So I'd say I get a really great diversity of experience in my parish, and I've enjoyed that. If I could sum it up, it's just I get to do a lot as a priest and see how God works.
It is, I mean, you know, obviously I've been a priest now for over 50 years. It is one of the most exciting jobs in the world because it is so diverse.
Right.
It's so diverse emotionally. I mean, you're dealing with people dying or someone's lost a child, and then you're doing weddings and celebrating births, you know, and then you're also administering and you're counseling and you're preaching and you're teaching and you're doing, you know, organizing. It's just so, you can't get bored in it.
Right.
Just full and stretches you.
A boring day is sometimes a welcome day, you know?
Yeah, it is overly demanding.
Every now and then. You know.
And what's been, would you say, the most challenging thing?
Yeah,
one thing?
The challenging thing is that the experience that I had in my parish growing up is not one that for various reasons a lot of people have had. So you do meet a lot of people who are away from the faith, and and you have great desires for your own parish to really grow in faith. And so it's hard because you can't force it, and you know, figuring out, we know a lot of our problems, but the solutions are evading us to some degree. So.
Of course, that's been the great challenge and the call that we've been getting all the way back to Paul VI and John Paul. And the new evangelization is mostly evangelizing
the people who we do see
are already there, and then hopefully we go out and go after the lost sheep, and then finally going after people who are never been Christians.
Yeah, and of course myself, because I'm the lost sheep in the 99.
That's right.
And
well, that's part of
as
the
we
journey.
prayed before we started the filming, we're praying for all the people who watch this live or on cable, but also on YouTube in the future to say
forever.
It's worth it. You found it worth it to follow the Lord, as I have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's never found wanting.
Never found wanting. So blessings on your new life. We'll have to have you come back and talk more about your priestly life. We didn't get much into that for you, but it's wonderful. The journey of faith in God's the Hound of Heaven. In this mission I was talking about, the Hound of Heaven is a wonderful poem by a Christian about Jesus being the hound who's chasing us all the time to get us. And he gets us if we do have to cooperate at the end. And so, but thank you. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation with Father Paul Bourne. Again, he grew up in St. Patrick's, is now at the Plymouth Catholic community there, and it's a wonderful, I have to say, as an old priest, one of the most encouraging things is the way God is raising up some extraordinarily gifted, faithful young priests, you know. Somebody said, you know, the Christian faith is only one generation away from extinction. So it's always good that a new generation is coming forth. So thank you,
Absolutely.
and God bless, and blessings to you.